Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 1st of June 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, we've finally shaken off May. She's gone.
Where has the year gone?
Where's the year gone? Well, we don't know. Time is speeding up. That's our view anyway. Well, we better start with David Cameron's favourite subject, which will be war.
War, yes. So this is further reaction from China to the speech that we were talking about yesterday made by Ash Carter to the US naval officers graduates. This is Hua Chunying, who's the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson. She said, some from the US side, while living in the 21st century, are still thinking with the Cold War mentality. They seek to create opponents for themselves around the world. They're clinging to the Cold War mindset, which will lead nowhere. We have no interest in any form of Cold War, nor do we intend to star in any of the Hollywood blockbusters scripted and directed by some officials in the US military. But China is not afraid of and will definitely respond to any action that threatens to undermine China's territorial sovereignty and security. And she said China and the US have extensive common interests and face common challenges in the Asia-Pacific region. The two sides have everything to gain from cooperation and everything to lose from confrontation. Non-conflict to non-confrontation, mutual respect and win-win cooperation best serves the fundamental interests of the two countries and peoples, as well as peace and development of the region and beyond. And so that was really the message that was being sent. But a stronger message is being sent today because they're saying that they would declare an air defense zone in the South China Sea if the US continues to provoke, as they have been in the last few months. They said if the US keeps making provocative moves to challenge China's sovereignty in the region, it will give Beijing a good opportunity to declare basically a no-fly zone, I suppose. An air defense zone. I'm not quite sure what the difference is.
Well, that could be up for discussion, really, but I suppose that you would say a no-fly zone is a particular action, whereas an air defense zone is saying it's dangerous to come into it. Presumably, right. That's what's going on. Okay. But isn't it remarkable that the Chinese can take a clear look and see that American politics and American military policy has now become almost a Disney Hollywood film? It's reality and Hollywood blurred into one.
Well, you may have a bit more to say about that in a minute.
I thought we would do.
Yes. Right. So, more conversation in the mainstream about this and more recognition of the realities of it. This is Richard Sakwa, who's Professor of Russian and European Politics at the University of Kent. And he's an Associate Fellow of the Russia and Eurasia Programme at Chatham House. And he is saying it has become increasingly clear that the peace order in Europe established at the end of the Cold War is unstable. He says since Russia's military intervention in Syria at the end of September 2015, one of the most salient conflicts has been the struggle between Russia and the US for the right to decide who should have priority in deciding Syria's fate. This is one of the issues over which an armed confrontation could take place. In fact, there are so many potential tripwires it is impossible to predict which precisely could set off a chain of events that could escalate to outright military confrontation. The Atlantic security community is in danger of sleepwalking into war. While Atlantic defense commentators talk of Vladimir Putin's increasingly aggressive behavior and have made the phrase Russian aggression part of the standard language, few have stopped to think what created such a dangerous situation in the first place. So this is the commentary from some in Chatham House. I question, Brian, whether the Atlantic security community is in danger of sleepwalking into war. I personally think they're doing it with their eyes wide open and with absolute intent.
Well, I would agree with that, Mike, but Chatham House is one of these organisations that simply, one, it's injecting policy, and two, it's the spokespiece on all sorts of events happening. But who are these people? If you actually say, who are these people that simply come up in the mainstream press and comment, and particularly making statements that America should be deciding Syria's fate. What gives America the right to decide the fate of a nation state?
Well, no, that's right. But what he was saying is that the argument between the US and Russia is about who decides Syria's fate. And of course, that's not the argument at all.
No, exactly. That is not the argument because the Russians have not said they're there to decide Syria's fate.
Right. Incredible, but nonetheless, you know, it is at least the discussion is happening, I suppose. Here's another example of it. This is an opinion piece in the Los Angeles Times, and this time it's Joshua Shinfrinson, who's an international security fellow at Dartmouth College and assistant professor at the Bush School of Government and Texas A&M University, and he's basically making the point that the US broke the promise to Russia that was made. The US denies that they made this promise, but the promise was that if Germany was allowed to reunify, that there would be no expansion of NATO towards Russia's borders. And the point that's being made in the Times article here in the opinion piece is that while the US denies that this was the case, nonetheless, there are lots of internal memos and emails and other documentation which demonstrates, and they highlight the documentation in this article, which demonstrates that the US absolutely had agreed this. And so the point that's really being made here is that the aggressor is not Putin, and if Putin is reacting in any particular way, it's hardly surprising.
Well, it's totally unsurprising, Mike. I just watched this stuff, and it is so obvious that at the moment we have NATO conducting aggressive moves towards the Russian border, and this has been going on now for, well, we'll say months, but it's in the year bracket, and any one of those moves would, back in the Cold War, any minor movement towards the other side would be considered hostile, and with the increase in high-tech weapons, which automatically mean that the closer you get, the less warning time there is, the more dangerous the systems. It's constantly been NATO that's been moving forward, not the Russians, with, of course, the lies from America with Obama and David Cameron in particular.
Yeah, it is incredible.
We pause there because
yes.
we are constantly feeling we don't know what more we can say. What we're being told in this country by our own government, and particularly the BBC's utter pack of lies. And of course, it's taking the Russians and the Chinese now to actually be telling a truthful angle on what's going on. A subject we've been featuring quite a lot in the last couple of weeks has been the NGO complex and George Soros, and here we have another example of it. This time we're talking Macedonia, and this article saying that on the 5th of June, Macedonia will face early parliamentary elections. For the last 2 years, Western powers, including the EU and USA, have attempted to oust the current Macedonian leadership, and the article is a discussion with a publicist and independent analyst, Slobodan Tomic, who is discussing his assessment of the political situation. And I just wanted to give a couple of quotes from this because he's quite explicit about what he says. He says, actually, I'd like to say that the Macedonians are friendly partners for all four sides of the compass. We can't be enemies with America. We can't be enemies with Russia, China, or any other. Macedonia opens the gates to all four corners of the world. In Macedonia, we have only one problem, the so-called NGOs, or non-governmental society, these are evil organizations, since according to public opinion, George Soros is the real person who wants to destroy the country, its name, its language, and identity. Discussing the anti-government protests that have been going on, he says these protests were, of course, organised by Soros. I stick with this statement because we, as the electorate, have paid for the so-called colour revolution. Such colour revolutions started, as you know, in North Africa. We know what happened then in Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, and Libya. This organisation, this so-called self-proclaimed open society organisation, organised the protests in Macedonia. They have followed the same scenario as in the Ukraine. And he was then asked, why does the EU want to topple the current government? He said that Macedonia is a real example of a multicultural country which is not a member of the EU. All countries can learn real multiculturalism and tolerance from us. The
current leadership has the courage to invite the BRICS group into Macedonia, and this is the reason why our so-called Western friends are so nervous. So they began a new strategy for Macedonia. In real politics, there's no place for emotions. In politics, there are only interests. So a very interesting discussion. Do go and have a look at the rest of it.
The gentleman's answering his own question, really, because the reason they want to crush Macedonia is if it is operating successfully as a multicultural state, national state, nation state, then that can't fit the EU model. So Soros is going to be in there to undermine it with the NGOs as soon as possible. And I think we're going to come on to the role of the NGOs and the voluntary sector a little bit later in the news. Well, on the subject of propaganda at work, let's just come back to the fact that supposedly there's going to be an EU referendum. And we brought up this yesterday, that there'd been a little bit of interference with Vote Leave posters, this one saying, "Halt the German advance." And this had caused a bit of controversy. There was another one of these posters produced where it was the word German was blacked out. But the reason we're bringing this in is because we didn't know what was going on, whether there was some form of smear campaign against Leave. Well, today we've had information that it appears the dirty tactics have now increased, because what's been happening is Vote Leave material is being deliberately damaged, destroyed, taken away. So this email here saying that over a number of poster sites, boards that would have put up a few days ago have been pulled off their mountings and taken away, and the value of those is about £50 a site. Goes on to say that this is a coordinated attack, as some of them are in completely different locations. Is this the sort of Europe we're going to get if we remain in? I ask. Well, the author is absolutely right. That is exactly what we're going to get. And then it goes on. We've had a lot of vandalism already, with 8-foot billboards vandalised. Someone's repainted one of them, which looks okay. But obviously Remain have no scruples and no understanding of fair play, or even want to give us a free hand in this referendum. So this is the final comment. It's looking like some third world country respects to third world countries. Well, this is the state of Britain. We've got propaganda. We haven't got a fair referendum because the government is pouring money into the Remain vote. And now we've got the sort of dirty tactics we've seen between the political parties at general elections, where billboards and posters are destroyed overnight by one or other of the sides. So you mentioned yesterday, Mike, Britain, the most corrupt country in the world. And now we've got so-called voting system to go with it, not to be trusted, biased propaganda. It's a pretty sad day altogether. Absolutely.
Well, look, I couldn't resist bringing the lovely Baroness Shields back on screen. And if we remember, this was she was talking about Islamic State and what a great PR machine they had behind them. So she said, folks, this might sound shocking, but the Islamic State has become a powerful global brand. Their messages are professionally produced and delivered in over 20 languages. She said they produce Hollywood-style recruitment films, game-quality CGI. She said that the brand is well articulated and reinforced, including memorabilia such as watches, mugs, and even children's backpacks. And if you remember, we suggested that this was almost Disney-like. Well, I've got to thank the person who tweeted this through to me, because it is incredibly Disney-like, isn't it?
It is.
Yes. Now you'll notice the site logo down on the left-hand side of that. Well, Site is the company which handles all of Daesh's PR. This is the organisation that releases the beheading videos and so on. So that's why that's there, I would imagine.
Isn't it interesting? We got the Baroness, Mike, talking about Hollywood-style releases on the side of Daesh and Islamic State and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And we've got the Chinese also recognising that out of the West, we've got this Hollywood style to what's being released to the general public in UK, US, and worldwide.
Absolutely. And just as a final note from what Baroness Shields has been saying, all of Daesh's PR machine is sanctioned by a central command, and we just have to keep that in mind at all times.
And she doesn't actually say what that central command is. So she's picked up on a phrase which has clearly been leaked by the security services to sound good, but there's no meaning to it. What is that central command? Or is that Downing Street?
I believe it has the name Dave.
Dave?
Dave, yeah.
As in Cameron?
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, the EU's been hard at work along the same kind of lines because they are intending to crack down on what they class as illegal hate speech. They're going to criminalise perpetrators of illegal hate speech, and they're going to promote independent counter-narratives. Now, this is the press release from yesterday, and it says that it's to respond to the challenge of ensuring that online platforms do not offer opportunities for illegal online hate speech to spread virally, and they say that they are including a series of commitments to combat the spread of illegal hate speech online in Europe, and that this is being developed together with Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Microsoft, the various IT companies that have signed up to this. And they say that Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Microsoft, the rest, must recognize the value of independent counter speech against hateful rhetoric and prejudice, aim to continue their work in identifying and promoting independent counter-narratives, new ideas and initiatives, and supporting educational programs that encourage critical thinking. So what the EU is doing here is absolutely arguing that these companies need to start a proactive censorship regime where they censor what is considered to be hate speech and they promote what is considered to be a counter-narrative to hate speech. So what does that mean? That means that if they decide the UK column is considered hate speech because we say that we don't like the European Union, then they would fund some kind of counter-narrative to what it is we're saying.
That's exactly what they're talking about. They are talking about government propaganda, and this is the bit that really grips me, if I can use that expression, is that we go back to the Cold War, and what the West was saying is, look at the nasty Russians, they're pumping out propaganda, the only news, the only debate is government controlled in the Eastern Bloc and in Russia. What's happening in the West at the moment, exactly the same propaganda, except we could say it's worse because it's being pushed out under a veneer of respectability. The BBC, trust us, we are putting the truth out, utter lies. So they're going to control the lot if we allow it. And what does it tell us, Mike? I think it tells us that the European Union, as with the British government, getting very frightened of the speed at which the truth is coming out through the internet.
Not just the European Union. Here's another example of it. This is Thailand from a couple of days ago. And what this article is talking about is new laws in Thailand, which it's been discussed for quite some time that the Thai government want to have a Chinese-style Great Firewall sort of thing. But what they're talking about is funneling all internet traffic in Thailand through a central location where the government and the military in particular just sniff absolutely every single packet of data off the line and use that to monitor what's going on within the country. Well, we know that Theresa May wants the cooperation of UK internet service providers to do a similar thing, not quite to the same degree, but it's only a matter of time.
It's a start, and they're heading in that direction.
Yeah.
Well, before we move on with the rest of the news, let's cover the weather, because I know a few people getting a little bit distressed that we haven't spoken about the weather yet. Generally dull and gloomy, so we've got Manchester, Shropshire, Worthing, Rhondda, Hampshire all looking a bit overcast. London is cold and raining. Well, that's probably appropriate for Westminster at least. But we're delighted to say that Perthshire, Glasgow and Rhyl are all sunny. It's a bit iffy here in Plymouth. Well, let's have a look at this interesting story, because while the sun was out, people were eating ice creams. And the Plymouth Herald here reporting of a gentleman who was in Paignton. He was walking along Paignton seafront, was attacked by a mob of seagulls. This happens from time to time. He drops his ice cream cone and in no time at all he's going to be fined by the Litter Gestapo. And the company involved is 3GS, and according to the Herald, they said, "We're satisfied that the fine was correctly issued in accordance with Section 87 of the Environmental Protection Act 1990, and we cannot comment any further on individual cases." So there we are. We've got private operatives simply issuing a fine on the spot, and I'm going to say we would like some help as to the status of this action under the law of this country. But let's follow it through a bit, because who is 3GS, or who are they? Here's the website, very interesting logo, liked it a lot. We got the eye and the black sun top left for logo lovers. And it says it's a specialist service provider focused on the provision of environmental and civil enforcement services, applying the best innovative technology to deliver the most efficient solutions. So all that sounds really lovely. And if we add a bit more, it says formed in 2012 by the managing director himself, a former borough councillor. He doesn't like giving his name. They're looking for continued growth. They're highly motivated. They've got experience in local government, environment, police, finance and law. They don't say who any of these people are. And they're going to forge strong relationships with their clients.
So let me just understand this. A former borough councillor, what happens here? Backhanders to his mates, and then suddenly all these services get outsourced to his company?
Well, I couldn't talk about backhanders, but it is extremely interesting how a borough councillor can suddenly set up a firm that's getting contracts in more than one area. And notice the objective is to grow our presence throughout the UK, combining our commercial and philanthropic ethos, developing new and unique initiatives that will help deliver cleaner, greener streets, parks, open space, using the latest, most innovative technology.
You used the word Gestapo earlier.
I did.
That is what this is.
Well, they're green Gestapo, yeah. But of course they're corporative. Well, I did a little look on the internet, and here we've got an article about a lady who was accused by this company of dropping a cigarette end. They tried to slap a fine on her. She stood her ground, and eventually she got an apology from Paul Buttivan, who is the managing director of 3GS. But this is in Swansea, so now we're seeing this little empire building. So Paignton to Swansea, it's an ethical business where staff are trained to the highest standards, but we've made an honest mistake, and we've got a policy for openness, except for saying who their actual staff are.
Yes.
And they've apologised. So who's the man? Well, here he is. And he was a councillor with Hillingdon, but he isn't at the moment. But you say, quite rightly, Mike, who is this person, and how could he actually be making anything happen? So we're seeing private companies coming in to enforce the law. And on the other hand, everything is, we've got to volunteer to do things to make society work. So this is pretty dirty stuff altogether.
Yeah, we're just about to come on to that. So, Brian, happy Volunteers Week.
Thank you.
Did you know about it?
I didn't know.
Right.
So I'm feeling embarrassed about that because, well, probably we'll get a visit by the volunteer Gestapo.
Yes. Well, here we are. Here we are, Volunteers Week, the big celebration, 1st to 12th of June. More than a week, apparently, because 1 week isn't enough to celebrate volunteering. So here we are, Volunteer Week. Over 21 million people volunteer in the UK at least once a year, apparently. And this contributes to an estimated £23.9 billion to the UK economy. So that's pretty significant. And 21 million people are a shining example of how we make a big difference to individuals and communities each day. From improving the environment we live in, spending time with those who may otherwise be lonely, and contributing to a range of other essential services and support. And they believe such a big contribution is worth such a big celebration. So there you go. Well, who's running this? Here they are. This is the National Council for Voluntary Organisations. Volunteers Week is an annual event which takes place at the start of June. It celebrates the contribution made by volunteers across the UK. It's run by NCVO in partnership with Volunteer Development Scotland, Volunteer Now, which is Northern Ireland, and Wales Council for Voluntary Action. It started, NCVO that is, started in 1919 as the National Council of Social Services, and it now has a diverse community, they say, of over 12,000 member organisations, a third of the voluntary sector workforce in England, and they help them thrive in what they do, so that's good. The chairman is Martin Lewis, and of course ex-BBC presenter for BBC News programmes, and of course he knew nothing about Jimmy Savile. So what's this all about? Well, we get a clue what it's about from this report from Dame Mary March. This is her review of skills and leadership in the voluntary community and social enterprise sector. And let's just have a little look at this particular quote. Leadership is learnt at every stage of the journey through the sector, from young leaders, e.g. Dare to Lead, Uprising and Leap, through to aspiring and emerging leaders. Employers, funders and individuals themselves should encourage help to develop and enable the take-up of opportunities for leadership development and reflective learning through peer support, mentoring, coaching and action learning. At the right stage, opportunities should be made for access to more in-depth development programs, as is common for the identified talent pool in the public and private sectors, e.g. ACEVO, SSE, NACVA, NCVO, Common Purpose, Leadership Trust, Windsor Leadership Trust, Clore Social Leadership Programme. So in a paragraph, we get what this is all about. You get millions of people to volunteer for various things. You take their good-heartedness, and out of that lot, you identify the people that are most likely to be suitable for programs run by Common Purpose and the various other leadership courses. You put them through that and you get your volunteer Gestapo. That's exactly how it works.
That's exactly how it works. So what should be people volunteering for genuine reasons they want to help? They're being brought together in a big control network. Very interested to see Clore leadership in there. I believe that is specifically focused on Jewish leadership, where you have young people who are mentored into quite high-level positions, and also the Windsor Leadership Trust, which of course is Duke of Edinburgh, yeah, operating at extremely high level. So this is loose communism. It's communitarianism, but basically, the more they talk about individuals helping themselves, empowering communities, the more we can see the system is actually locking everybody in society into some government-controlled network. It's pretty dangerous, insidious stuff.
Absolutely, and here's a little bit more, because here is a report that was written for the Fabian Society by David Blunkett, and of course it was the Blair government that started this whole third sector initiative off. It has morphed into the big society, but this was the thinking that was going on at the time. So here's a report for the Fabian Society called Mutual Action, Common Purpose, Empowering the Third Sector. And this is the key quote. We need a different relationship between government and governed, between people and elected representatives, and between civil society and formal politics. That is it. They are reorganizing and have been reorganizing for the last 40 years the way we are governed, our system of governance. It has gone from what we are no longer in a representative democracy or a constitutional monarchy. We've moved towards some kind of warped, perverted, participatory democracy, in inverted commas, where the only people that participate are the third sector that have been through the leadership training programs. And if you want to know more about this, do have a look at the various article series. This is a good place to start. This article, Common Purpose in Your Locality. This is another locality, is another example of this. But the Common Purpose Effect series, the Global Governance series of articles on the website, and the Common Purpose Effect series, did I mention them? Do have a look at those articles, because if you understand what's being said in those, you'll understand really a lot of what goes on in this country and in fact globally now.
Several people have been asking over the last couple of days if Common Purpose is sort of retreating in UK. And I think I've got to give the answer to that. Absolutely not. What you're seeing is they're pulling out of the bottom level tier of operation and they are moving into the high level tier. So this is why we can now see common purpose at this level in the programs Mike's just described. And of course, they're absolutely pushing overseas leadership development, creation of global leaders, leading beyond authority, and this magic word or phrase, cultural intelligence. So common purpose has definitely not disappeared, but what we can also see is that the common purpose ethos has now been picked up by all of these third sector organisations, quangos, NGOs. So the common purpose agenda is being pushed in by a whole range of other organisations, which makes it even more dangerous. Well, the volunteering is one part of how communities are being affected. Let's have a look at this. Now, some people might be very sensitive to this subject because what we're talking about is death and dying and indeed palliative care. But this is the Mail article, and there was outrage when a Dying Matters piece of text appeared with St Helier Hospital, and in this it's saying that living well and dying well can be fun. Now you've really got to have a read of this article and the memo, that's the word I was looking for there, the memo, Dying Matters Awareness Week. The palliative care team had stands in Epsom and St Helier Hospital to promote the National Dying Matters Awareness Week. Dying Matters celebrates life. There's some very interesting language in this, Mike, and reminds us that we only die once. We've got to be talking about death. We've got to be telling our families about it, and it's all good fun because dying can be fun. A lot of people got very upset about this, but they were also talking about a death by chocolate event. This is mixing very dark subjects, difficult to handle at the best of times for people suffering bereavement, but suddenly it's being put into a very cartoon-like, jokey way. So if you get into who is behind it, because this is the place to start, you can go and have a look at the Dying Matters website, and they tell us something very interesting because they've got a mission. They are a coalition, and they are going to be they will be provoking fundamental change in society in which dying, death and bereavement will be seen and accepted as a natural part of everybody's life cycle. So we now need these organisations to explain how we should deal with people dying, something that's been happening, I think, as long as people have been around. But now we need Dying Matters because this unknown group of people are going to advise us. We've got to change our whole views on death and dying, and they're going to tell us how to do it. And once we've followed their lead, we'll all be okay, apparently. So we just thought we'd ask the question, who is deciding there must be fundamental changes in society? And this brings us right back to who's driving the communitarian agenda. So let's have a little look at how this sort of thing comes about. So remember the topic, living well, dying well is fun. That's the mentality. So they say that back in the 1980s, we had hospices becoming widespread and specialist palliative care services developing around the country. By 2008, the government had pushed out an end-of-life care strategy. I've made the point this is the same governments that of course are pro-death as far as abortions are concerned, but they're going to look after and make sure we enjoy our ultimate death. So here we've got debate over palliative care between the Department of Health, NHS, and it's decided there needs to be a single body. This is the grouping up of anybody who's trying to genuinely help people at end of life. And it creates the National Council for Palliative Care. So now we've got it under quasi-government control. And what are they doing? Well, here it is. They are working to shape strategies and plans. So our elected representatives are not creating the agenda. This has all been brought into the realm of an unaccountable national body. We follow it through because out of that we get Dying Matters Coalition, And who are they? Well, they boast that they've got 30,000 members. And look who's in it. Everybody: hospices, care homes, NHS, GPs, funeral directors, legal sector, charities, faith groups, and more. So suddenly death has become jolly good fun and very big business. Who's behind it? Well, if we get in a bit deeper, we of course come up with some very reliable people here. With that, his name goes straight out of my head. Michael Howard. Something of the night about him. The Dark Knight was the description, I think, in the Daily Telegraph. Upstanding member of society to be trusted. I'm not sure I would stand by that one. But if we dig in a bit more, what do we find? Well, you can fill in a questionnaire all about how you'd like to have your funeral. I followed it through. It's quite interesting, actually. What I learnt was who's behind this: Sun Alliance, Sun Life, I beg your pardon, and AXA. So now we've got the insurance companies starting to make a little bit of money out of it. And if that's not enough, here are the drug companies, and they're boasting that they're a corporate supporter of NCPC. And of course, they're not benefiting at all from the profits on drugs administered to end-of-life people. So if I'm sounding a bit cynical, I am, because as somebody's just posted in the chat room, this is utterly sick stuff. Do we believe there should be palliative care for people in end of life? Yes, certainly in a loving environment. Can that be done by good people at local level? Yes. But what we've got here is a political agenda which apparently claims that life must be death.
Now, David Cameron loves to tell us that ISIS is a death cult. But if David Cameron is the controlling influence of ISIS, it's merely an offshoot of his own death cult. And if we look at this in the context of, for example, the rivers of blood out of the Tower of London at the last, if you remember, at the commemorations for the war, we see this thread right through everything that government does these days. It's all about death. It's all about death, and this is absolutely deliberate, because we're seeing a reversal of what life should be. We should be upbeat, positive. We should be, to use their terminology, celebrating life. Instead, what's been thrown at us is illness, death, depression. Watch EastEnders to get the full effect of it. This is a deliberate attack on the mind of the nation. It is not accidental, it's planned, and we're now starting to see it for what it is. Of course, there's an economic effect to this as well, and this is an interesting report out from the OECD. It's being discussed in Public Finance International here, where they're describing it as the productivity puzzle. And they're saying that the OECD has attempted to find answers to the so-called productivity puzzle in a report that suggests the problem could be structural rather than cyclical. The think tank's compendium of productivity indicators rules out mismeasurement as explaining away the decline in productivity. So what are we talking about here? Well, here is the graph which shows what's going on. They're saying that the OECD is pointing out that in most OECD countries, the productivity slowdown has cut across nearly all sectors, affecting both large and small firms, but has been particularly marked in those industries where new digital and technological innovations were expected to generate productivity dividends, such as the information, communication, finance, and insurance sectors. And the other point that they make is that the slowdown started well before the financial crisis in 2008, despite increased participation of firms in global value chains, as they describe them, rising education levels. I don't think we've really got rising education levels, and technological innovations. Now, as you can see from that graph, Britain is absolutely in the worst position. So we had in 1996 to 2004, an average productivity. So productivity is measured as the GDP of the country per hour worked. So it's GDP divided by the number of hours that are worked in a year. And we were seeing between 96 and 2004 a growth in productivity of 2.5% each year. And then between 2004 and 2014, in that 10-year period, we had a fall where the average productivity growth each year was only 0.3%. Now, who was Prime Minister during most of those years? Well, the significant number of those years was David Cameron. The situation hasn't improved since the second term. So David Cameron and George Osborne doing a fantastic job. Every time they talk about what a great record they have with jobs, of course they talk about jobs, 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 and they don't talk about the type of jobs. And this is something that we've been commenting on for a very long time now. We are being turned into a nation of shelf stackers, coffee servers, low quality, extremely low productivity jobs. And that is absolutely reflected in the fact that Britain comes out as the worst example in the OECD countries for productivity.
Yeah, so what is it, denying with their lips what they do with their hands, but it's the destruction of the country.
Absolutely.
It's all done in a very quiet, smooth manner. I'm not sure what's happened to our steel industry. I've temporarily lost track of that.
It's still for sale, hasn't been quite sold yet.
So the government has no interest in that. And if you look across many high-tech projects which have gone on over the years, they've simply been shut down by successive governments. So it doesn't matter whether they're Labour or Conservative, or you've got Lib Dems involved in there somewhere. The British governments are attacking, successive British governments are attacking the British people. So the other subject that, of course, is of interest to the government is the abuse of children. And David Cameron was the man trying to shut down investigation of that. Let's have a look at this horrific story from Scotland, which is a little boy murdered by his mum and her partner. So two ladies looking after three young boys. And what was happening to these children was just astonishing. They were kept, particularly this little boy, Liam Fee, was kept in cages. He was given cold showers, he was tied down, he was beaten, he was stood on, he was locked up in dark spaces with snakes and rats. And we're told, Mike, that well, nobody in Fife Social Services knew about this, really. Well, actually they did, because if you read the article, you will discover that they absolutely did know about it. But the little boy apparently fell through the net. It was a little bit of a mistake. Nobody really picked it up, and then he ends up dead. And the mother and her partner have just been convicted for that death. So let's see how this pans out in Scotland, where, of course, Scotland is pushing hard for the named person scheme. And credit where it's due, this is Ruth Davidson, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, and she picked up the BBC because the BBC had actually decided this was a good time, if I can just highlight this, should come up, here we are, to say, well, of course, the new named person scheme could help prevent such cases like this. To which Ruth came back pretty quickly and said, well, actually, this little boy was already under the named person scheme as part of the Fife pilot of the scheme. And oh dear, that was obviously the wrong answer because we can't show it all. But there was then a massive attack. Somebody here said, you aren't using that poor child's death as political capital, are you? Tories wouldn't do that. Well, all Ruth Davidson was doing was telling the exact truth. And of course, in telling the truth that this little boy was under the named person scheme, what she is doing is absolutely highlighting that the named person scheme is complete rubbish and gives no child protection because aside from anything else, the report goes back to the same failing social services in the first place. But the other thing about this case is that if you analyse the abuse of the child, many people have said to us that the use of dark spaces and cages to contain the little boy and indeed the other two boys, and the use of snakes and rats, the sort of thing people have in their house normally, implies that there's an element of satanic ritual abuse in this case. And several people saying there are a lot more questions to be asked about why the local authority didn't do anything when they had known 2 years earlier something was badly wrong in this household. So let's have a look at the quality of the people involved. We've got Dougie, or Doogie, I suppose it is, Doogie Dunlop, Head of Education and Children's Services. And this is what he said in the Mail. He's Vice Chair of Fife Child Protection Committee. He said the death was a tragedy and that the body would reflect on the case to see whether there is any scope for improvement. And then he responded to the verdicts and he said the Chief Officers Group have already commissioned a significant case review into all the circumstances leading up to Liam's death. I saw you wince there, Mike, because I think this was the question. This man appears unsure that anything went wrong.
What staggers me, Brian, is that as time passes and they push more of this type of draconian legislation in place, named person scheme, multi-agency public protection arrangements, all this kind of draconian fascistic or control which is being put in place, and yet nothing gets any better.
Because it's not supposed to.
Absolutely.
You don't want it to get better. You want society to be broken up, families to be broken up. But what you want to introduce is the control. It's the control they are after, not the protection of the children. Well, if you're not familiar with the named person scheme, let's remind ourselves. This was one of the tweets that David Scott brought up, that Nicola Sturgeon was telling fibs because she said that the named person scheme was not compulsory. And what David Scott showed in the legislation was overwhelmingly it is compulsory, because it's compulsory for the named person to report on the child and on the family if they discover anything wrong as listed in those paragraphs.
Right, I'm gonna defend Nippy here. Because this is a great example of why we've got to watch very carefully what politicians say, because what Nippy said was that it was not compulsory for the parents to take part in the named person scheme.
Right.
But the parents have no part in the named person scheme. It's a relationship between the named person and the child. That's compulsory. But the parents, it's not compulsory for them.
It's not compulsory for them.
So you've got to be careful what politicians say and watch every word.
Which we do.
Yes.
Well, let's follow it through and remind people on this one, which we reported on a little while ago. So this was the Mail saying that basically mothers were going to be screened for alcohol. This was going on with Glasgow Children's Hospital charity. Here's the charity coming back in my... they're saying, well, you know, it's very naughty for pregnant mums to be drinking, and we're going to be recording this. And we said, well, watch out, because this information is absolutely going to be brought back into the named person scheme. So they said the occasional drink will not be highlighted by the study researchers. Who are these researchers? What do we know about them and their moral values? No idea at all.
Do they exist?
Do they exist? And this one is recent news. Oxford Mail, primary school pupils get help from trained mental health staff. So we are labelling this the English named person scheme by stealth. These people are coming in to monitor the mental health of primary school children, because apparently head teachers of local primary schools are saying they're getting more and more children with problems. Could that be related to vaccines, one wonders? So Oxford University is going to sort it out, and they're pretty confident, because I've put it as small print. In October 2014, Oxford Health NHS Foundation Trust started a scheme which led to mental health professionals working in secondary schools. So at every stage from conception, the state is interested in your child, and certainly the moment your child is at school, the state is sniffing around like a pack of wolves, basically. So it's becoming increasingly obvious what is going on. We'll just leave you with a reminder. Of course, the National Police Chief Council claimed that those who came forward with crime reports were believed, and we pointed out some time ago that we could pick a few cases where this was clearly not true. Robert Green, Holly Gregg case, Melanie Shaw, the gentleman in Oxford who pointed out the abuse at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College, Ben Fellows, and Ella Draper, the Hampstead mother. So we've got an interesting situation where the state says, trust us to look after your child, but the facts show that when we go to the state for help in real and very extreme cases, the state isn't there to help. It's pretty serious, Mike.
Yep.
We will end on that serious note. Thank you very much for joining us. If you're a newcomer to UK Column and you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Or if you feel you can make us a donation, that will be gratefully received, because we can only do what we do with your help. Thank you very much to those who've given us donations over the last few days. Thank you.